Okay, let's get started. If more people join, fantastic. If they don't, also, that's fine. Okay, so welcome to the portrait class. This is the basics of portrait class. I don't claim to be a fantastic portrait artist, but I do think I sometimes help with some of the basics with people, and sometimes I show even the most advanced people some bits they didn't know you could do in Sketch Club. So I'm not claiming to be fantastic at this, but hopefully some of what I do helps you guys out. We do have some fantastic portrait artists on here already, so thank you guys for joining, even though you know all this stuff. Okay, so what we're going to go through in this session here is we're going to go through, actually let's stick with the face for now. We go through the basic portrait, we're going to go through the basic measurements on a face as well. Okay, so when you're looking face on directly, it's very easy to do your measurements, and that's what you've got to make sure you understand first. So we start with the basics and then we can move from there. We'll look at the face at different angles as well. One of the warnings, well there's several warnings that come with this particular class. First warning is you'll see a lot of photographs of me. I apologise, but that's the best person for me to draw. I don't have to ask anyone for permission, I can just use my own face. So that's the first warning. Second warning is you'll have to get used to the Brit accent. I know a few of you guys like it. If you don't like it, I'm afraid I don't do any other accents very well. So it's going to be a Brit accent. Third one is we've done this before. We did this class about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think it was. It's almost a duplication of what we did before, but we had a few troubles with the recording of it, so BP asked if I didn't mind coming back. So as long as you guys don't mind hearing the same thing again, then we'll go through it. If you want to go now because it's the same thing again, I understand, that's fine. I don't want to bore you guys. Okay, so an example of the person that is giving you the teaching. We've got the example here of different face, different angles, but also where the light's coming from as well. Okay, so one of the things I always say in these classes is if you're going to draw a face and you're going to use a photograph for it, then you have to make sure that you're using a good light source on there as well. There's nothing worse than using a selfie where someone's got a flash on it and it's completely flat with no shadows. Okay, so what you're looking for is a bit of contrast, a bit of natural light is usually quite good. Some of these are not as good as others. The one in the top left, one light bright here, but then all of this is the same sort of colour all the way across here in tonal differences. You've got some darks in the nooks and crannies here, and the beard slightly darker, but it's not an ideal one. This one here, we've got a lot more different variants in the lighting. Okay, so this is this one I like. This one I would have trouble with, and then down at the bottom here again, this one's not a very good one, and this one's not a very good one. Okay, so out of those pictures there, I would have chosen this one up the top here to start working from. Okay, because you're looking for as many kind of different tones. You've got 3 different tones going across there, and you've got dark, especially with the bags under my eyes here, here, and dark here. Okay, so all of this, you've got to make sure you're looking at a decent photograph before you start. Okay, and I will use my face throughout this class, but these are very good ways of making sure that if you're going to use a selfie, if you're going to use somebody else's photograph, you're not looking at a flat image. A photograph with a flash is terrible for doing a portrait from. You'll end up doing very traditional kind of line work when you're doing everything, because you're stuck with only the very lightest of creases in the face. Okay, so make sure you're getting a good light source on there, getting a nice bit of contrast. Okay, so now we got started with the warnings, and now you've seen my face. We're going to get through, we get started, we're going to go through proportion basics, and they are very basics, but they help me. So if they help me, hopefully they'll help you. We'll go through my measuring techniques that I use. They're not special, they're not something I've made up, I'm sure many people use them. And this time around when we're doing this, I'll talk a little bit about grid work and how what I'm doing isn't that much different to grid work, it's just without the grids. It'll make sense when we get there. Okay. Angles and shading, we'll go through different angles, we'll go through some extreme angles, we'll go through shading, we'll go through Sketch Club tools, so we'll look at things like smainting as well and how to get some really decent brushes, and then we'll have a go at the end where people can drop off if they've had enough of listening as well. Okay? And I haven't asked for his permission, but I will probably use Goth Daddy's face again for the last piece there, because he sent me some great photographs. Okay. So, proportion basics. Let's get started. Oh, and the other thing, and I forgot this before. Let's go back again. Here. The other thing is the portrait group. I'm here and you're listening to me, so I'm going to make sure I advertise the portrait group. Portrait group is fantastic. It's another place where you can show all your artwork off. And we got some fantastic leaders on there, which I just happen to be part of as well, which I'm very lucky to be. They will look through every piece of portraits that they possibly can, and we'll do events whenever we possibly can as well. So very, very good that they let me come ahead and do this lesson with you guys, because they're very talented people. Right, sorry, plugging aside, let's get on with the basics. Okay, now I'm going to reduce this down a little bit because I can't see it all over the chat screen, but hopefully you guys can see that okay. So those of you that came along before, it's going to be exactly the same thing we went through last time, and it helps if I'm on the actual layer. Let's do that again. There we go. And to start off with, we're going to use mirror. Mirror makes it much easier for a face on portrait, especially if we're going over our proportions. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we're going to draw a line at the top of the head and one at the bottom of the head. Okay, I think everybody here can do that. I hope so. Okay, then we're going to draw a line in between. So right in the middle, bang. There we go. And then we're going to do it again. We're going to do one in the middle of that. Bang. And we're going to do one again in the middle of that. Now, those of you with a really good imagination can probably see a bit of a face starting out there, but you need a real good imagination to see it. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit sketchy on here, hence the tool, but that's just so that I get a rough head shape. So I'm just connecting my top around to my bottom here. It's a very rough head shape here. Yeah, hopefully everybody can do what I've done so far. There's nothing crazy hard in there at all. Okay, now let's start doing some of these measurements. So I've already put my lines in there. So this here, I'll put an arrow. This line here, that is where my eyes are going to go. This line here is where my nose is going to go, and this line here is where my mouth's going to go. And again, I'm sure I've bored a few of you guys with this before, so do bear with me. That's what this is all about, is boring you. Okay, so we know we've got our nose here, so let's stick a nose in. I'm going to do it all very sketchy. There we go, so we've got a bit of a nose thing going on there. Now, as I tell everybody and I warn everybody, when I draw portraits, if I don't do this properly and I don't do my measurements, I always draw my noses too long. I always draw my mouths too short as well. These are all these silly faults that I make. Okay, so we've got nose, we've got our eye marking. My ears will go from here, my eye, and they'll go to the bottom of my nose. There we go. So now we have our ears in. My mouth, like I said, is down here. So let's put our mouth in. And then up here we're going to put our eyes in. Now, eyes, they can be a real pain. If I start drawing them too close or too far, the face will look a little bit weird. I'm using standard proportions. I don't know if Andrew Loomis has come across with these or not. I'm sorry, I don't know who he is. Potentially, yes. Right, but these are standard facial proportions anyway. Okay, so if I draw my eye distance here, sorry I got a little bit thrown by that, I don't know who that person is. An eye is always an eye distance apart. Okay, so I can fit an eye, I won't do it in the middle here, but I can fit an eye in the middle. Okay, so if I know roughly how wide this is, and it's generally roughly to the edge of the nose, I know that my eye will be that same sort of measurement. So you've basically got 1, 2, 3 like this, with the nose in the middle. Okay, and then I can just start marking that up with an eye in between. And hopefully you get the rough shape of a face. There we go. There we go. It's got a bit of a broken nose thing going on at the moment, but you get the idea. You fill in the rest of it, you add a bit of shading, and you get a face out of the whole equation. There we go. I love Sketchy tool, one of my favourite tools. So remember those proportions. Remember the here, halfway again for the nose, sorry, and then halfway again for the mouth, and then at the top. Because even if I turn my face on the side, I'm still going to use those exact same proportions. So if I take off my mirror, let's take that off, let's rub out the face, we don't need it anymore. Da, 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 da. We can use those exact same proportions again, but for, let's do a profile. I hate doing profiles, I really find them quite difficult, which is why it's good that we did them as a challenge as part of the portrait group, because it really pushed me to give it a go. And also the reason why I like profiles is because I got to see my friend Veeb add in a very, very good profile picture. So here we go again. Let's do our lines. Let's do the centre mark there again, and centre mark again. Same measurements we just did, yep. This time, instead of drawing our face straight on, we can just try and move it to the side. So this is going to be very rough, because I don't have a reference to hand right now. But you can see, I didn't put my mouth mark in, which would have been about there. There we go. Roughly, very roughly, we start to build a face using exactly the same proportions that we just drew for a face on. Yeah, we don't care about the distance between the eyes anymore because we can't see the other eye anyway. But we've got the basics of the side of the face already built from doing that. There we go. Okay, so exactly the same, just 1, 2, split it in half, that's my eye, split it in half again, that's my nose, split the bottom in half again for the mouth. So using exactly the same proportion type thing. We've got a bit of a forehead thing going on here, but you know, we're doing stuff fast. There we go. The ear going back, now that's a good question. The ear going back, this is something I really struggle with, and the way that I try and deal with it, right or wrong, and leads on very nicely to what I'm going to do in a second as well, is I need to work out the fact that I've got a jawbone. Yeah, I just got to try and angle up and make sure that there's a face building here. So the ear, top and bottom, is the eye and the bottom of the nose again. And I just got to make sure the jawline looks good. Generally I might do it too long or too short, and generally a little bit squarish as well, but I use the jaw to build up, and when I think that's the edge of it, that's when I start putting the ear on. What we're going to do actually, we're going to jump to a bit of the class that I was going to do a little bit later because it fits in nicely with BP's question. So what I showed you guys before when I did this is exactly what I'm going to show you again now. Is when you're drawing an imaginary face in particular, you don't have a reference guide, you don't have a photograph in front of you. You should always try and have some sort of reference, even if it's just helping you out. Even if you've got something that is a bit of a, what's the right word? Inspiration. Okay, so, but if you don't, you need to remember, let's just save what we're doing so far, that underneath all this skin we've actually got a skull, we've got muscle, we've got fat, we've got all of those sort of lovely bits and pieces. So when you're building your face, there we go, and this is just a very rough face again, still sticks with the same proportions by the way, still the same sort of proportions, but when you're building your face you've got to remember that underneath all of this you've got skull, you've got your muscles, you've got everything like that that's underneath it. Okay, so going back to BP's question, working out roughly where the ear goes, I know the height of it because I've just taught you guys that particular piece, but I need to work out where the muscles and everything else goes. So what we can do here is we can look at a skull. Okay, so we need to make sure that with our skull, yeah, we got that. We've got all of our, helps we've got the right colour. There we go. Got all of our proportions. Even though this isn't full on, this isn't straight on, all of our proportions are roughly the same here still. See, top, middle, bottom, in between. So, underneath it, we've got a skull. Now I have to remember that when I'm drawing an imaginary picture, which is what we've got here. So you can see that the skull and the jawline and everything else has to line up. If I was just doing an imaginary face and it looks like a skull couldn't fit in there, then I know I've gone wrong somewhere, I've broken the face. And when I combine the face with the skull, we come away with this very kind of cool double image here. There you go, you can see here, I'm looking at the cheekbones, it's got very high cheekbones. I can bring the jawbone all the way back, probably goes back a little bit too far to be honest, but you can see how it all fits together. If I was to add more flesh on there, we get a little bit of a chubbier face, we lose some of this kind of very angular features, etc. But the main thing is, if I'm trying to work out where the ear goes or where something else goes, Remember the proportions I've gone through with you guys, but remember underneath it all we've got this muscle and this skull and everything else that's got to fit in, and it's got to make sense as well. Okay, now I've looked up for a second, I can see we've got a few more people that have joined. Hello everybody, I hope I have not bored you with anything we went through last time. Hope you enjoyed the class. Okay, so let's go back to our regular class again. So we're back, oh sorry, this one. There we go. There we go, right. Okay, so we were back to the profile face. Like I said, I don't like doing profiles, but the same applies what we went through before, the measurements on the face here. We've got a bit of a kind of boxer face going on. And again, remember what I've just said there. You need to remember there's a skull underneath all of this. So a jawbone on the skull would come around here. I'd come into the kind of teeth area here. The teeth will come backwards on the jaw. And we've got the jawbone would kind of fit in at this sort of angle here. So as long as I'm remembering, and again this isn't particularly accurate, how it all fits together. I've got an eye socket here on the skull, nose bone here. You can see how this did fit roughly around the skull. Not the best, but a start. There you go, so our imaginary face there would actually work as a starting point. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense guys so far. Yeah, you could do one of those Day of the Dead type masks that way. There you go. Right, so everyone kind of getting the understanding of those proportions. Just doing your lines like we just done there. And if you've not done many portraits before, and I think a few of you guys have, using that mirror option is a really good way of just doing that looking face onto it. I think it's very useful for you guys. If you have done portraits before, and I've done a few as you guys know, I always make mistakes every time, every portrait. And I have to keep going back and just remembering some of these proportions. Because it's very easy to try and copy an image, but it's very difficult to remember there's all the other bits and pieces underneath the skin, so that really does help. There's a very good class with Red Willow, where she did an eye class, and she breaks down the eye into all of its different pieces. And that's a very, very useful thing to do again when you're doing the face, is just remember underneath it all you've got all that stuff going on. Okay, so we've done our face straight on, and we've done our face from the side. When you start turning the head around a little bit, it starts becoming a little bit harder. So, again, we've already gone through, don't forget underneath the skin, because we brought it up just then. But whilst we're going over it again, there's no harm in us taking a look at some of the muscles that go underneath the skin as well. And I do that every time. Let's go back again. So, muscles underneath the skin as well. Muscles underneath the skin, very useful to know roughly where they go. And this will not be it won't be biologically correct. There you go, I won't go with the right word. But you get a good idea of how it all fits together. Okay, so again, let's go back to our putting the face together. Rough face. Something I went through again, we're going to go through it again now, is if I want to make my face look more feminine, especially if I'm doing an imaginary face, is I can add more curves to it. So I can curve this out a little bit more. Not fatter, I'm definitely not saying fatter, but I am saying everything on my face here should be more, that's a little bit further down, more curves. If I want to make this look more masculine, I can put more straight lines into it. Okay, so just remember that when you're putting your imaginary faces together, is straight lines will make it more masculine, which is what I'm just doing here. Or curves, always think curves when you're doing everything, and make it a little bit more feminine. Okay, so I've forgotten what we're doing. Oh, muscles, that's what we're doing. So if I start looking at my face again, we're going to go real fast just to get the face going. There we go. Just get some rough features in there. Again, this is using the same proportions we went through earlier, just to get a face going. There we go. Right, so we've got a rough face going on here. Now, muscles underneath the skin. Very important that you understand these, because as you get older, or if you get thinner, you can see the muscles more, and wrinkles are basically where the face is folding on each of those particular parts. So the forehead itself, the muscles, as far as I remember, and this has been a little bit of time since I've done this, is they follow this sort of pattern around the face here, and they come in at a bit of an angle, but as soon as they get to the eyes, they do this kind of circular motion around the eyes here. So muscle work goes like this. Around the nose, you don't get much muscles going on there, but you do get it coming down around the sides. On the side of the mouth, etc., it's this kind of, this sort of shape. And around the mouth again, I'm pretty sure, but someone will correct me if I'm wrong. Again, it's this sort of motion, and again around this sort of way. Cheeks around this sort of way. So if you look at a face without much skin on it, or if you just appreciate someone without much weight to them on the face, you can see how the muscle work starts building up all your wrinkles on your face as well. Yep. So you can see there how when you're building your face up, you can see how the muscle work underneath it works. So we've been through the skull, so if I draw my skull underneath here again, it goes like this. Especially good if you're drawing very thin, morbid faces. There we go. You can see how the skull fits in underneath all of that, but you've got to think about the muscle as well. Yeah, super wrinkly. It's, if I was to start removing a lot of the lines on here, it would start building up a face that could follow the wrinkle kind of lines on there. There we go. We've got a basic face shape on there again. Yeah, Dark Man without the mask, that's a very good analogy. Or something very Hellraiser-ish. There we go. Okay, so again, think about the skull, think about the muscle on top of it as well. All very, very useful. And I was going to do something else off the back of that, but I can't remember now. Oh yes, I was going to go back to what I said earlier. Razor. About the female versus masculine face type thing. I know Cap said, oh my god. Not saying anything about women's faces being fat or anything like that at all. It is literally, if you're trying to put a face together and you want it to look a little bit more feminine, think, well, the whole body really, think curves. No offence meant to anybody when I'm saying all this stuff. When I'm doing the eyes and everything, I've forced myself to think curves. And it's not anime eyes, but just everything. Nose, everything, lips. Try not to get any kind of straight lines in there at all. And again, that chin's a little bit too. But just think, it's looking a little bit rounded now. But everything I'm doing, all the time, just try and think curves. And then if I was to build this out, when I'm coming into the eyes, again, try not any straight lines at all. Not the nicest of faces. But you get the idea. The more I try and stick away from any sort of straight lines, the more we're looking at a slightly more feminine type face here. Okay. That one's pretty awful, but we're going to move on anyway and forget that ever happened. Okay. Back to here. Measuring techniques. Okay. Like I said, it's unlikely anything I'm about to say to you in any of this class is something unique. Somebody somewhere has already said it before. We already had a name of another artist that uses measuring technique that we went through for proportions. But something I use, and somebody can tell me whichever teacher is out there that does something similar. And again, let's make it, so I'm drawing on this one. There we go. Is very similar to how you do a bit of archery as well. So let's pick a face, doesn't matter which one for now. Let's pick Aiden here for now. Right, when you're measuring, think about all of your different angles, etc. So if we're doing archery and you're using a longbow or a bare bow, something without a sight on it at all, you've got your target here. There we go. And you're aiming your bow at that. Now, if that's straight in front of you and the arrow's flying straight, then that should be pretty easy. But the further away you move it, you can't just aim directly at the target here. and I am going something with this, guys. So what happens is, as you're shooting, a right or left-handed person will need to aim slightly one side or slightly the other side. And if it's further away, they might need to aim slightly higher up, or if it's further away, they might need to aim slightly further down. Now what some people do is they use the surroundings. So if I've got a tree over here, they will aim at the tip of the tree, and they know that at a certain distance, if they keep aiming at the top of that tree, they will always hit that target. Now that's very useful if that tree's always there and it doesn't grow, but it doesn't help if you're not in the same place and you're trying to aim at the same thing. So measuring technique comes into here, where you pick an object that is going to stay still, which is the target. It's going to be the same every time. And then you pick the distance from the target to where you need to aim, like this. Okay, so I am picking a measurement in relation to two objects. And the same underneath it. If I am needing to aim slightly to the left and to hit the target there from a distance, and it's at a distance here, I need to work out the angle here to the target so that I can hit it. Okay, so they're exactly the same when I'm doing a face, is I work out angles and distances from each other on the face, especially if I'm doing a reproduction of a photograph or something like that. You'll see what I mean in a second. So if we look at a vampire, which we've got here, this is Aidan from a very good TV series, Being Human. So he's got a very angular face, thus proving my male's a very angular face technique. Okay, now what I would do is draw a kind of imaginary line in my head, and I don't do this very well, but I draw an imaginary line on the page in my head, there we go, let's do sketchy again. Just kind of down the centre, and then I'm looking for the kind of angles that I'm going off of that centre. So an artist, a traditional artist, if they're doing a portrait, might hold up a pen or a brush, and they'd use that as their centre point, and they'd look for the angles off the back of that. If I was doing grid work, so you might know a few artists on here that do grid work, I would have this sort of thing going on my page, and I'd have exactly the same on the photograph there, and then I'm looking at angles within each of those boxes. So that's why sometimes people prefer to do that sort of thing as well. Yeah, sorry, I'm just doing stuff quickly, but yeah, vector would be a good way to delete stuff. Undo would also work quite nicely. Okay, so I pick my centre line, and then I'm looking at angles. So Aidan's head is off at a slight angle. It's coming down at this sort of angle here. Okay, I can see that his line of his chin is actually quite solid. It's this sort of diagonal. It's a slight angle like this. I'm coming up at this sort of angle here, and then I start using the angles off from that. So I've got the chin comes off at this sort of angle here, and starts to curve up slightly here. And then I go from there, I measure the distance from here outwards to the edge of the neck, and again bring that down. It's a slight angle this way. I look for his eyes, and now we can start using some of our techniques. So we know the eyes are roughly here at this sort of angle. I've probably gone a little bit too much of an angle. So we know that the nose is going to be roughly half of that to the bottom of the chin. So I'm measuring to there. So from there to there, that's halfway for the nose. And again, halfway roughly for the mouth. And I say roughly, you're going to meet people that have got bigger noses, obviously, or eyes are slightly closer together, etc. But especially with Hollywood types, they're very, very symmetrical faces. There's this thing called the theory of, and I don't know how you say this, phi, I guess, which is the golden rule for how a beautiful face supposedly is drawn up. It's a very symmetrical face. If you believe that a face can be made beautiful by its measurements, which I guess we do. That's how your movie and your models are picked. Anyways, right, back to the measurements. So each time I'm picking a new part of the face, I'm picking the angles of it each time as well. So I'm bringing this down. His nose is at this sort of angle here. Underneath his eyes, he's got this sort of angle coming down the face here, coming out here, etc. Bringing the face down here. And his eyebrows actually stay pretty level. They don't actually go up too much at all. We've got from the edge of the eyebrow here, we measure out to here, that's the head, here, etc. So I'm not going to bore you by doing a complete replication of this right now, but what I'm trying to get across is each part for my initial line work of the face, I can just gradually measure all this out. The side of the mouth, which I didn't go through earlier, the side of the mouth should always be the centre of the eye. So bring the side of the mouth up, be the centre of the eye on both sides. Got the cheek and jawbone. I can see already that I've gone too high up with the jawbone, so I can just bring it in. And if I brought that in, I need to bring the neck in, so let's bring the neck in there as well. Okay, so it's all angles, etc. Yeah, corner of the mouth, centre of the eye. So bring it up. I've got the eye coming in here roughly, etc. There we go. Nose. All the way down. Lips. Chin. And he's got a bit of an over chin on my version here, but that's fine for the demo. Okay, and the distance between the eyes again is an eye distance, etc. like this. There we go. Got a bit of it looks almost crow-like now because of the lines on the face. There we go. Okay, so keep with my measurements. I've turned it slightly on the side, so the distance is kind of more of an angle, but everything stays true. Side of mouth, centre of the eye, centre of the eye. We've done our measurements down the page, like I said, so the top of his head's up here somewhere. Halfway down is the eyes, half of that nose, half of that mouth, bottom of that chin. Yeah, same techniques again, but this measuring technique I'm trying to get across here, and my very bad analogy using the target, is I'm using angles on everything I'm doing. Here, around here, etc. around the side here. You can see his t-shirt comes out roughly here, comes out this sort of angle. Here, I'm measuring as much as I possibly can, like this. Measure out to the side of the head, so I'm measuring this distance here. Angle of his ear, it's got slightly angled up ears like this, until we are building a face. Yep. I don't see the lino in him. He'd have to have a very big bouffant haircut like this, I think, for lino. Lino had a huge quiffy type thing going on, didn't he? But yes, he's got the pupils of a lion, as a thundercat there. You're right. Okay. So, there we go. We're using angles, we're using measurements. I'm using measurements between items again, so I want to keep reiterating this, and again, this is the reason for the target analogy. I'm checking distances here, I'm checking angles up here, I'm checking the angle here. Down the side of the face it goes quite straight, so I'm measuring all of those different bits as well. Yes, Aiden. The American version of the Being Human Vampire, not the British one. Okay, so there we go, we've got the face. Now, Gridwork would work exactly the same as this, but I have these lines down the page here, and I have the lines on the picture here as well. They're exactly the same, and I'm just doing the measurements within tiny boxes each time. And I try and get one box right, and then I move along to my next box and I try and measure all that up right as well. So it's still using the measuring technique, but it's using it on a smaller scale. I've got a tiny picture here this big that I'm trying to deal with at a time, and once I've got all of the right details in that box there, I can move to the one next to it, I join it all up, and it measure my distances on all of this stuff as well. So Grid works as well using these measurements. In fact, it works very well for these sort of measurements. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see everything we went through on the proportions works, but now start introducing angles when the face gets really difficult, when it starts becoming a little bit more of an angular thing. It's not straight on anymore. Can't use mirror on this anymore either. But we start using the angles and the distance between stuff. Negative space also very useful. If I'm drawing this here, if I've got an object in the background, so I've got a chair or something here, I can use distances from that, etc. I can use the angle on that as well. So use stuff around your picture as well as on the picture, and always think the angles. Okay, so that was our measuring technique. Let's go back to looking at a face in different angles. This is me from underneath. So one of the photographs from earlier, this is one here now from underneath. So I've taken a picture from underneath using the iPad. Like I said, it wasn't very good lighting for some of those pictures. But what you can start seeing with these pictures here is some of the proportions start changing. Could you, by measuring a portrait, use that, make one at a different angle? Yes, you could. There's a really good template that I've seen. I didn't bring it for this particular class, but how you can get basic measurements for a face when you rotate it around. It's about 180 degrees because you don't care about the back. But yes, there are proportions, and when you change it, you can use it as a template. So we might try and put that on the portrait group as one of the helping templates that might help people. So I'll talk to NJ about that, because NJ was the one person that helped me with that. So yes, we'll try and put that out for you. Yes, you can do measurements around in a similar fashion. But this is trying to help as well. This is from underneath, and just trying to get an idea of what some of the pieces of the face that will change. So the angle of my face here, it will start being more kind of this shape, narrow at the top, wider at the bottom. It'll do this sort of thing because you're looking up into the chin. So I see a hell of a lot more chin here to here. You can see all of my chins there. There we go. I see a lot more of the top lip as well. So you can see here my top lip, it's kind of obvious if you think about it. I'm looking straight up into my lip. You get the pleasure of looking straight up my nose. Left all the hairs out for the purposes of this. And you get to see a whole lot more of my top eyelid here. Also you can see that my pupils here, they're going to get a little bit more hidden because they're getting blocked now by the bottom lid here. Okay, I get to see a whole lot more of the underneath of my eye here because I'm looking up into it. Forehead, not so much of it now because it's going off into the distance, and a little bit of my hair at the top there. So ears, they're also pushed down the face because we're looking now at a more extreme angle. They will not be here to the nose, that would be weird, that would be me looking straight on, so they are tilted down the face. And again, if I can't use my normal measuring techniques, I can use some. The eyes are still an eye apart because we're looking face on here still, but I can't use my ears, they won't be the same. The eyes are the same, so from the corner of the mouth to the middle of the eye, that's still the same, but I lose out on the ears. So I would just use measuring technique. I would look at the picture of myself and I'd work out roughly where the top of the ear goes against, I guess, the bottom of my nostrils there, and it's capping off at the bottom of my chin, or cheekbone, I guess, there. Okay, but again, that's where the measuring starts coming in. When stuff starts changing for the angle, you can use some applications like Poser, where you can actually pick a computerized anatomy and you can move it around for yourself. That sort of thing will also help you. If you don't have a person, you can use that. It's a little bit like a modern day mannequin. It's very, very useful. There's the more expensive Poser as a program as well, which can be quite good as well. But as an app, there's one out there, Poser, which allows you to rotate a model. You can do these sort of angles with the head as well. I think there's a DAS model where you can just look at a head, a very detailed computerized head, and you can move it around. You can also change the facial expressions on it as well with some sliders. So that one's quite good as well. I think it's done by Maya. So yeah, if you don't have a model, use a photograph, use a selfie. If you've all got iPads or iPhones, so you can take pictures of yourself as well. Now if we're looking at, this is more of a downwards angle, it makes me look quite evil. You can see how the ears now shift up. There we go. The ears are now going up. I now see very little to no of the skin, muscle, etc. above the eye, and that's all now dropped away because of the angle here. My nose will now start shifting. It's more of a centerpiece now. You get to see more of the Grand Hooter, and I start getting white underneath the eyes because my face is tilted down and my eyes are changing the angle they're at, so you get to see a lot more of this sort of thing going on the right hand side here. So you see more white underneath, and you see more of the fleshy bit underneath here of the lid here. Again, because I've tilted the head, the lips, etc., they start coming up. So you can see this upwards arrow here, and the face takes on much more of this shape, more of a V shape. Everything's rotated around. Again, you see a lot more of the forehead because that's now coming more prominent. But all of the other measuring bits stay true. The eyes should still be roughly an eye apart here. corner of my mouth. Like I said, I do slightly corner. There we go, here to here. I'll show you the brush in a second. Actually, remind me, Schwabby, if I don't go over that. Say, Chris, show me the brush you used on those faces. I've been trying to go for a particular style, and I can't do it. So I'm going back to my old style again. But I wanted to use these particular brushes, and I'll show you which ones they were. Works very well with a Sensu stylus. Okay, so again, forehead bigger, measurements on the eyes because I'm still face on is exactly the same distance between them. I lose the top of the eye, I gain white underneath the eye, I gain eyelid as well. If I'm starting to zoom in, I would spend a lot of time underneath the eyelid. This corner of the mouth straight up to the centre of the eye again, same. I lose a lot of the top lip because we've started to tilt that underneath, and this is the shape that we're going for here, a bit more this. Okay, and the ears will definitely shift up. Cool, so that's looking at the face at a slightly different angle again. Shading. I don't know if any of you guys have looked at my tonal class. I only work in black and white and greys because my colour blindness means I pick some hideous colours if I try otherwise. I'll go through colour picker later so you guys can have a look at that. What do I do with glasses? Okay, good point. Glasses I always do on a different layer. I wear glasses, so these pictures I've taken my glasses off for them. But I would always put a... Let's just make use of this slide now. I would do it on a separate layer because they're a pain in the arse on their own, so I want to keep them separate from the actual face that I've spent all that time on. Glasses, they are very angular. You're looking at very straight lines, etc. on the face. There we go. And I'm just working out the angles on the face here and where they rest on the face. I very much use measuring technique on glasses. I look at the difference between the eye to the corner here. I look at the angle that these are going to branch backwards to the ears. And what you will also find is with a quite high prescription, the skin will bend behind the glass as well. So you'll see this sort of effect on the skin. It will come in at this sort of angle. You'll see like a gap here where it's kind of bent it out of shape. But my highest recommendation with glasses is you always do them on a totally different layer, and you use the measuring technique as much as you possibly can to check all your details within the glasses and matching off. So distance between here and here, the angle, the eye against it, etc. Use your angles, use your measurements, and you'll get glasses on there. When you're doing then, once you've done that, you can start adding your shading on top of that. So we're going to go through shading anyway in a second. You'll get light around where the glass hits with the light here. Typically there'll be some sort of light reflection on if it's like a plastic or something here, and then you'll hate to do it, but you'll have some sort of reflections on the glass itself that will go over the lovely work you might have done on your portrait in the background. So you'll get something a little bit more reflective like that. So that's the sort of thing. And if you can, look really carefully at the reflection. It's just as important as the actual face itself. It's going to be out of focus most of the time, but if you can work out an image of a person that's taken a picture in there, try and add it. I've seen some fantastic pictures of eyes, and eyes in particular, where people have drawn real detailed reflections inside the eyes. So try and keep an eye out for that as well. But yes, glasses are a real pain. Always do one separate layer, always measure from the distance between the actual eye and the actual glass itself, and the angles underneath it. Very, very important. So, glasses, very good question. Very difficult to draw. Do separate them out. Right, shading. I'm not going to spend ages on shading because we did that as a completely separate lesson before. But I'll go over the basics. So when you're drawing the face, work out again. So let's go for, let's cheat again. Always cheating with this. Let's go for our mirrored face again. Da, 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 da. Da, 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 da. and get our basics of the face in place. Right, got a sort of cone head thing going on there. Okay, we got a bit more of a feminine look this time. Right, there we go, there's our basic outline. What we're going to do from there is we're going to turn off our mirroring for a start, because you can't really use that when you're going to do this. We're going to pick where our light's coming from. An easy one is coming from this side here. We can go through different angles if you want later, but that's our basic outline. Let's start getting some shading in. Now, my favourite brush of all, this is the one I use far more than anything else, and the one I go back to every time is this one. It's the I don't know what you'd explain it as, just simple lines, cross hatch type style. One of my favourites. Is really good for absolutely all the styles I do. The one I was doing earlier, Schwabby, is this one here, and I'll find it for you now. We're going to go through this again later, but it's under natural media, and where's it gone? There it is, Paintbrush by Cat. That was the one I was using before. There we go. So, shading, let's go back to my favourite brush here, is for us colourblind people. If we're working in tones, I use this very simple greys. I've got all my scale there. I've got my light, I've got my highlighting, and I've got my black, which is my darkest shadows possible. So I've got everything I need in one line. Very, very easy for me. Harder for you guys that don't get away with just black and white. It's just me being lazy. But for me, nice and easy. So never ever start with either end of the scale. Always start in the middle, make your way out gradually. My face would typically be started off like this. This is how I would do it anyway. Let's bring up one of these, put it underneath. I would load in a middle shade here. That's my starting shade. Then I would work on top of that. So like I said, our light's coming from this side. Let's say we've got our light source here. Let's build it up a little bit. This is our light here. So I'm going to start with the darkness. I always prefer starting dark to light. You guys work however you want. So I've moved one to the left. What was the name of my favourite brush? I don't know what the name of it is actually. It's this cross line one here. I don't know if BP you can find out for us. But that's the one I use. Right, so let's do some shading. So we're looking for wherever that light can't hit. And we're going to work off quite light to start off with. So here, down this side of the head's unlikely to get much of it at all. Down this side here, down round here, across the side here, all the way down the side of this face bit here. And then when you come over here, there's going to be bits, even though it's quite close to the light, there's going to be bits here that can't catch that light. It's going to be a little bit of skin in the way. Around the face, around here, nearly said etc again. There's going to be a bit of the skin here that won't catch it. All the way around here, around here. Okay, so we've got our starting point. We'll get a little bit of 3D going on there. Move one step to the left again. Here, this is our darker shade. Again, I don't go above 50% opacity if I can help it. You just layer it up by using opacity. So you can see down the bottom there, my slider is about 50%. If I'm getting serious, I can start shifting it either way. And I'm going to replicate a lot of what I've already done. In here, in the lips, down the side, around the base, down the side of the head. Not going over it all in the same way, but I am picking an awful lot of the same places. There we go. Ears completely shaded out. Most of the eye is going to be in the same shadow. Down the side here, a little bit there, not much. Bit at the other side of the lip. There we go. And another thing I always try and do is when I'm doing a portrait to start off with, and you guys, you can use whatever you like out of this, you can ignore whatever you don't like, is I always try and start my brush off quite large. That's for my base bits and pieces. As I get more and more detailed, so we'll do a demo down the side here, I start bringing it in a little bit. So the more detailed I get, the smaller the brush gets. Until I'm zooming in and I'm starting to do more of the detailed bits and pieces like that. So think left to right and right to left when you're doing your shading, but also do the same when you're doing your features. You start off with a big brush and you gradually bring it down until you're dealing with your smaller brushes. And it's much the same as natural painting. If you're doing a natural painting, you start with the thicker brushes, you get the layers on, you start getting the colours down, and then you start going into the details on there. And I'm no good with any of that sort of stuff, but that's how I kind of replicate it on here. So we've done across here. Let's go to black. Now black is the dangerous one. I would even maybe bring the opacity down a little bit further, because it really does come across quite quickly on the page and you start losing definition. But there we go, start bringing in the face. We come down the side of the nose. We've got the nostrils will be the darkest place. There's very few angles where your nostrils aren't going to be darkest place. Got the side of the eye here. All of this is going to be pretty damn dark down the side here as well. I'm going to bring it up a little bit. There we go. Lips. Lips, you can get different lights and darks on them, but the actual separation of the lips is usually quite dark. It's like the folds around the eyes, they're usually quite dark as well. There we go. We're starting to get a bit more of a three-dimensional look about this, but we've only worked on the shading so far, the shadow so far. There we go. Right, now we can start moving to the right. So we go here, we can start looking at the light. So we know that light's hitting down this side of the face. We know it's going to hit this side of the nose, cheekbones, going to catch a lot of the ear, get in here, down this cheekbone, across the centre here. You'll catch a bit of this that's kind of sticking out. You'll catch a side of the eyebrow here. Again, think about everything that's going on underneath the skin, and that is kind of roughly where your light's going. Start going, step that back up to 50% again. Go into our lighter shade again, even still. Really do now start being careful where you're picking a light out from. You'd get a lot down there. And I don't have a model for me on this one, so again I'm just going for a rough idea of where light and dark would hit. You might catch a bit of the eye. You catch the side of the lip there. You get a bit going on around here as well. And then the ear would get a whole blast of light there. You might catch bits of the eye there. You get the idea though. This now is starting to look a bit more three-dimensional. As with the black, if I go in with the white, go in even lower opacity again, and then start picking out your lightest bits, you'll get a nice reflection on the eyes. You'll probably get a nice bit of light up here. You may, depending on the angle, may even get a bit of light coming through on the eye here. You might catch the side of the skin of the eye. Anyway, you get the idea. You've got very simple shading going on there. The brush that I've picked out, the one that I said I really like, it gives that sort of charcoal, chalky type effect, especially with this, the colours that I pick. I also find it's very good for blending gradually. But then all you need to do is, if you just thought about moving that light source, if I moved it maybe up here somewhere, you just think about where you can't get the angles, where the face is blocking the angles, and then you just adjust it accordingly. And again, like I mentioned, there's some apps out there with the face, the computerized faces that you can get. You can move light sources on those as well. It's very useful. But if you can take a photograph, or you can have somebody physically sitting in front of you, both of those two things are better than a computerized face. But it's whatever you feel comfortable with. Okay, but once you've done a million portraits, you start working out roughly where the kind of light sources go and roughly where things are going to block. Okay, so that's shading. And before I do move on, actually, one thing I want to show you guys, if you can go to the portraits groups again, and I'm going to do advertising for the fantastic group, have a look at NJ's work. She did a fantastic portrait where she's pieced something together. Looks like a very oil painting of her face, very quick painting, but it shows light and dark very, very well. So look at that. It's one of the tutorial sections on the forum. Okay, so we've gone through shading, we've gone through measurements, we've gone through proportions. We can go through and look at brushes, smainting and colour picking. Again, if you guys were on this before, this is going to be quite boring for you, but I love the brushes section of Sketch Club. I can go crazy in there for ages just picking out different ones, and I'll constantly find ones that are not suited to me but I want to give them a try. So what we're going to do here, we're going to move to a new page. Now brushes, if you didn't know already, I click on the brushes section, I click on the sliders, and then I can click on the add button, and then they're nicely categorized already for me. For the kind of work I do, I try and stick to the natural media section, and I look at the ones that people have already put together, and they're fantastic. These brushes are really detailed. You go through, you pick a new brush. I'm going to try one I haven't tried before. Let's try this oil one. I'll pick a colour, well in my case not a colour, bring the opacity down, give it a little quick go. Yes, I quite like that. That's a keeper. And then I can build up using that. So brushes, the thing I wanted to get across with brushes is there is a fantastic bunch of choices here. Some of the ones I use I'm not very good at, but I enjoy them. This one here is called Fine Brush. You really have to bring the size up. Really good. Fine Brush actually was the one I used, I think, on those pictures earlier as well. It gives this really lovely kind of dry brush effect, especially if you turn your opacity down quite a lot. You get this lovely dry brush effect, and if you go slightly higher you can build up on things. Really, really like this brush. Not one I'm brilliant with yet, but one I want to get better with. All of these are me kind of giving you a look at eyes here. And you just gradually build it up. That's why opacity is so good for your portraits. You build something from nothing like this. Love it. Okay, so brushes. We're going through brushes. Add, as I say, go for natural media. Is my favourite, but pick anything you like. There's some. You can probably come up with some crazy stuff through picking. Let's try dirt clod, for example. Bring that down the size a little bit. Yeah, it's got a very interesting look to it. Bit of a spray can type look, old school spray can. But yes, brushes. Find them all in the brushes section up the top there. Don't have to stick with what you start with. You don't have to stick with that just plain circle. You can go crazy in there. Smainting. Something, again, not one of my expert areas, but I love the effect it gives off. So you go to smudge, you pick your settings, you turn paint on, and you pick your paintbrush that you want to go and give a try. Let's go with, doesn't really matter for this, but let's go with that for now. Now when I'm starting to put paint on the page, it has this much better kind of paint effect where I'm dragging the paint across the page. Even better if I start adding in different colours. It's like I'm layering the paint on top of it. Go a little bit larger. And you get this lovely paint effect. Again, not something I'm an expert with at all, but it's something I want to show you guys so that you can have a little play with it. And you can see how quickly, if I was going for a full-on portrait, this would look like wet paint. I'm gradually moving on top of stuff here. And the more, if I just hold it down and just move it, the paint stays for the first part, and then after that I'm just smudging. If I just dab like pointillism type thing here, I keep the paint and then I'm just dragging at the far end of it all. So drag, 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 moving it through. So smainting, very, very useful. You can, if I drop the opacity too much, I do very small paint strokes. It's like not much paint on the brush at all. Bring it all the way up, you're almost like there's no drag to it at all. So it's finding a middle ground where you're happy with what it's dragging out for you. There you go, a bit of modern art fuel there on the page. What else do we have on there? Oh, and colour pick. Colour pick, this is good for us colourblind people or for people that are not very confident with their colours. So if I bring up a portrait, we'll pick me just for the sake of not upsetting anybody, so let's pick me here. There we go. So I can hold down anywhere on this page, and it's got glasses on as well, and I can start lowering down my base colours, and I know straight away that's the right colour for that particular area that I picked from. Bring this up a bit. and I can build my face up using that colour. Now if I want to come in close, I want to get my beard colour in here, I just hold down on it again. I can start getting the beard in. If I want to pick the colour of my incredibly crazy eyes here, I can click on there. I can start putting the eye colour in. So colour picker, brilliant for people that don't see colours right, or you want to get something looking a little bit more like this, and you don't want to do a photo overlay. Photo overlay where you've pulled the picture in as a separate layer and you're tracing on top of it. You can do that if you want, that's absolutely fine. There's some fantastic artists that do that on Sketch Club already. But if I want to pick out the colours I want, hold down, start again, gradually build up the portrait from the colours I've got on the page. It's just remembering to keep changing it, going back, picking out your darker shades until you build up a face. There we go, again, slightly abstract version of that picture. Okay, so that was absolutely everything I wanted to go through with you guys. It was start to finish, it was your proportions, it was your measurements, it was the different angles of the head. So remembering that a face is not just a flat image, you've got the skull, everything underneath it, all of those different bits and pieces. What I want to get across for a beginner's class. If you want somebody more advanced, then we can probably get somebody up that can do more advanced techniques. But this was all the basics and stuff to make you think when you're putting a portrait together. Now I can continue and I'll start on a separate picture for you guys, and I'll show you how I use my style on that.